Welcome to the Lance Wallnau Show. Wait until you hear what happened at our latest live event. Lance is bringing down the house. Let's jump in.
Because the great shaking that is upon us in the earth right now is a shaking of thrones and dominions and principalities and powers, and Jesus is longing for a church that can administrate the nations. My house should be called a house of prayer for all nations. Somehow we reduce that to being some kind of a sweet little altar call with grandmas praying for lost souls. I see it rather differently. I see it as an administration station decreeing and exercising governmental authority for what is permitted and what is not permitted in the nations of the earth. And where there's rebellious thrones and principalities at work, their God will overturn until he comes whose right it is to rule. And that's going to be the succession of convulsions in nations in history right up until Jesus himself returns as the judge that sets his house in order with a global exorcism of every demon. Before that happens, there's going to be a deliverance for his house. And the house is going to begin to walk in its administrative glory. And the angels are going to be very active with us in the next days to come. And people are going to come to the knowledge of God because they're going to step into an atmosphere where the demons were bound before they got there. They're walking outside the protective covering of the voodoo they were walking in, and they're walking into an atmosphere which is sealed off by the angels for conversions. That's why when they come into our midst, they're going to become saved. We're going to start to have these big rallies. I'm telling you, we're going to have rallies. It's going to be crazy. Because people are going to come in, the demons will be bound when they get there, and they're going to come to Jesus. That's what's coming. A huge move. As Psalm 2 is very appropriate. Psalm 2 is a great, so I was asking the Lord. I knew what was going to happen if Donald Trump was in office. I knew that Al-Qaeda was going to rush into the cockpit, was going to take over the plane. I wrote about it. I said it's going to be like, the left is going to act like Al-Qaeda. They're going to take box cutters with ballots. They're going to barge their way in. They're going to convince you to sit down, strap on your seatbelt. Everything is happening according to plan. And, this is a fair election. And then they're going to screw up the plane, and hopefully they can't crash it with us on board. But that's how bad it is. That's how I see it. It sounds apocalyptic, but I'm closer to the truth than a lot of people drinking the Kool-Aid. So now the battle is going from the national to the states. You heard it before. It's where your states are. And as I'm going, remember this. I introduced the Seven Mountain Message. Johnny Enlow and various others popularized it and preached it and wrote books on it. And as long as I like their books, I never had to write one. So I was like, read their books. But here's the revelation. There are certain spheres that shape the mind of culture. Those certain spheres are outlined thusly. There is the realm where the church is active. There is the family. If you've got the church and family mountains secure, the Jews, with only 2% of the American population, there are not that many Jews here, by the way, 2.5%, but they all go to the top of the mountains because they're trained to go to the top for their own survival. That's just the way it is, because you make yourself indispensable to culture because the last person you want to kill is your gynecologist. So church and family, the synagogue and the home. Jews have been able to exist in Europe, dispersed for 2,000 years, all over the world, come back to their homeland intact. Why? Because of the family, because of the synagogue, and because of tradition. And we're the same way. We came out of that. So as long as you've got a strong church, strong family, you can withstand any disease in your culture. That's why they've got to get to your church and family. And here's what starts to happen. When the government gets too big, it wants to put its ugly arms around all seven mountains, and that's called socialism, Marxism, or totalitarian dictatorship. Understand how simple this is. There's 7 realms that make up a free and a balanced life. The devil wants to take over all of them and make you do what he wants you to do. And that's what's happening right now with the romance with socialism. It's about the government mountain going from its orbit, where it's accountable and controlled, to being an ubiquitous authority over everybody. That's where it's trying to take us. It's not even happy. So, education, government, media, arts, and then over here, business or economics. I'm actually of a mind to think that media and arts are almost converging into each other, because half the time I'm watching media and it's nothing but fiction anyway. So But as of now, I'm saying here's the difference between media and arts, entertainment, and sports, and various stuff like that. Because the arts and entertainment mountain, the magic kingdom over here, arts is a suspension of reality. It's the Sabbath of the seven mountains. It's the place where recreation takes place. Media is where truth is supposed to be told regarding the nature of what's happening. So there's a distinction between the two. One is grounded in information about what's happening. The other one is a suspension of reality. That's what the arts mountain is supposed to be. But these seven mountains, just see where they are. At a national level, from Harvard to Princeton to Yale, they've all gotten so goofy, they just elected to put an atheist in charge of the Harvard chaplain's office. When you're that dumb, you don't deserve to be respected anymore. It's like putting Captain Crunch in charge of your armies. All right, so you got your government and your courts over here, your law, your media, your arts, your business, your education. And listen, the big mischief we've got is this education mountain is primarily feeding all the rest because they're indoctrinating sons and daughters, and it's the parents' fault. Because the parents care more about the prestigious degree for their little kid than they care about having their brains messed with by the Marxist intellectual pedophiles that are molding their heads into some kind of a weird worldview that hates the very country that gave them their freedom. There's only one at the top of each of those mountains. You have to see this. At the top of each of those mountains is gates of influence. Because at the top of each of these vertical structures is a hierarchy. The hierarchy always has gatekeepers. The gatekeepers are the elites in the university system or in the Hollywood entertainment system or in the Nashville music industry. It comes down to fewer people, and their goal is to kind of guard their elite turf. But they're the ones that primarily are the gatekeepers. Satan is very interested in them. This is why the church has to think more, why it's sad we didn't think about dominion more aggressively. Because as long as you're thinking you're not supposed to have any influence in this world, we don't train our children like the Jews do to become the doctors and the lawyers and the producers. Because we're training them to kind of like check out. Get ready for the rapture and avoid the Antichrist. Instead of going into all the world and making disciples of nations, we're trying to inoculate them from being messed up by the nation. Doesn't work well, does it? You don't develop herd immunity by hiding. So anyway, you got these gates over here. But here's what I want you to hear. God is coming down. This model here is invading the gates right now. That means economic systems, political systems, even media. God's going to start to overturn. Heaven's coming down. But here's the warning for us. If the house is swept clean by a move of God, 9 out of 10 Pentecostals, Charismatics, and Evangelicals consider an answer to prayer if for a couple of weeks there's this wild Jesus movement going on. All the lovers would just be, see, I told you. Till the dust settles. Once the wind stops blowing, Jesus says, if the house has been swept clean but not occupied, then 7 times more wicked spirits will come in. In other words, you don't want a revival without a reformation, because the Reformation, remember this, Reformation deals with the gates. It's top down. Revival is interpersonal. It's bottom up. When a revival goes this way and it doesn't meet a reformation that brings these things down under the authority of a new belief system, then the house is swept clean and reoccupied by even more vicious devils. Does that make sense? So we're not just looking for a romantic return to the Jesus movement, a wild 40-day prayer and fasting crusade, and then a sweeping move of Jesus. Because if we don't occupy academia, if we don't begin to occupy government and law and courts, if we don't begin to occupy the entertainment sector or the business sector, well, then it's going to be occupied by those demons that Jesus said are going to be more wicked than the first ones you cast out. You would have been better off leaving the status quo than emptying out the system with a reformation and having National Socialism and Hitler come in and take over your institutions. See how this works? So we're looking for a reformation that moves in the spirit of revival. Where a reformation and a revival hit, you have our definition of an awakening. Remember that, because you guys are using awakening here as language. Understand the difference. A reformation is institutional. It's not personal. It's just business. A revival is all personal, because it's your interaction with each other as revived people. But when the revived people take on the battle of reforming institutions, you have a great awakening. That's what we're looking for. We're not just looking for a sweeping move of God and then back to the status quo, which is worse than what it was before. We're looking for a restructure. That means our ideas are going to become controversial, and we have to be comfortable with that. We have to defend the biblical proposition of the way the world works.
Hey there, you just listened to an excerpt. That's a little bit of the podcast. So if you want to get the whole thing, because there's a lot more content there, go to lancewallnau.com/podcast. And instead of getting an excerpt, you get the entire message.
Everybody is concerned about what's happening to the economy. I mean, it wouldn't be too far conjecture to say that it's almost as though America is experiencing a recession that looks like it could be heading into a depression. And I'm praying that Donald Trump's prophecy that you'll see a depression the likes of which you've never seen never happens. But you know, the guy was uncannily accurate in so many things he said. That's why I'm telling my friends to go to Birch Gold right now, lancewallnau.com/Birch. Get the 25-page report on how you can protect your wealth, protect your investments, protect your IRA, protect your retirement. The report that they give you is an explanation as to how commodities and gold and silver variously work during periods of time when the dollar is unstable. I'm telling you, you need to get the education. Knowledge is power. lancewallnau.com/Birch. You won't